speaker of English, I can practice my English. So he said, reservation. I said, yes, reservation. He said, name. I said, Holden, which is my surname, Holden. I usually spell it. By the way, I was fascinated, this is going off at a tangent, I was fascinated as we were coming this morning to be behind a truck, a lorry that said John Holden on it. Because it's not a very common name. Anyway, I felt immediately at home. Okay, back to the hotel in Recife. I said Holden, Holden. He went to his computer, no reservation. 2 o'clock in the morning. I said yes, and I could hear my voice getting more and more English and kind of determined. And I said, yes, I have a reservation. He said, oh, no reservation. And I thought, oh my God, am I going to be sleeping on the beach tonight? Not good. And then he said, passport. So I gave him my passport. He opened it, and then he looked at me, did something on his computer, big smile. He said, ah, Susan. And what I had forgotten is that in Brazil they use the first name much more as an identifier than the second name. And here's me who'd been going to Brazil for 20, 25 years, and I'd forgotten that. And the breakdown in communication was not linguistic, it was cultural. And I use that as an example that as English is being more and more used in international context, we have to be alive to the range of cultural stereotypes that each country has, but also the personal ones. We have to realise that if people are stressed, and think of yourselves, and when I'm teaching I ask students to think of their own context. You know, think of your own life. Think when you're communicating something. Think when you go into a shop or store here in Lima and you're in a hurry and the blasted assistant is having a conversation with a friend and won't attend to you. And I suspect, I mean, you're all very nice people, but I suspect you get quite cross. And it probably affects the way you interact in Spanish with that person. And exactly the same in an office situation. Where emotion can get in the way. So I think one of the things we can help our students to do is try and bring the language of the textbook to life by trying to link it with the real world. Most textbooks have lots of conversations, dialogues, and they may be recorded, they may be on video, you may be able to use them on the interactive whiteboard. But what usually happens, most teachers go straight into the language. It's a conversation at a shop or a hotel, wherever it might be, and they go into it, maybe they ask the students to listen first. They go into it on a linguistic level. They might ask focus questions, or they might listen and then have comprehension questions. But very rarely, from what I've seen, do teachers say to the students, look at the photographs, which usually accompany a textbook dialogue. Look at the people in those photos. Who are they? What do you think they think about each other? And one of the ways I've discovered of bringing dialogues to life, conversations to life, is, if there are photos, is get the students to look at the photos, get them to speculate about the people, get them to think about who they are, the relationship between them, whether they like each other, maybe they hate each other. All that will affect the way they're communicating, and then try and use those ideas in listening to the dialogue and hopefully role play and having fun with the dialogue. And one of the problems for all of us as teachers, I think, is that we never have enough time. One of the things a lot of us do is, oh my gosh, I've only got another 10 minutes. I'm not quite sure how long I've got, by the way. It's a real question. Am I okay? Tell me another 5 minutes and then yeah? Okay. One of the things to help bring the dialogue to life is to spend time on it, but spend time on it not just from a language point of view, and use parallels with the student's own life, their own context, in the classroom context. And I think it will pay off. But the sort of push for all of us as teachers to think, I've got to get on, I've got to finish the lesson, I've got to get them towards the exam, and so on. So, linking real life and classroom language, very, very important. However, all of us are teaching within a context. And one of the problems, I think, for certainly people working in a full-time education context, by which I mean primary school, secondary school, whether state or private, is that exams are probably very important. And very often, and this is certainly true of international exams, I don't know about your exams here, but in most national curricula I know, the exams do not always reflect what you would like to be teaching and what your students might like to be learning, and the use they will have of English outside in the real world. And I think for anybody working in full-time education, I said at the beginning that I was trained to teach in UK English schools, anybody teaching in full-time education, the framework, the context, which may be set by Ministry of Education, may be set by a school principal, or may be set by an international exam board, that context can sometimes be difficult because it can seem to impose something that is very, very language focused on you when you want to do more things. I wish I had an answer to that. But I think it's something that anybody involved in teacher training needs to recognise, that if you're training teachers to go and work in the official school system, it's good to be idealistic, and one should be, and it's good to be creative, but one has a responsibility as a teacher, I think, to help your students pass an exam. And somehow, as teachers, we have to compromise a bit. So we can be idealistic, we can know what we want our students to be able to do, but don't, if you're training teachers, don't suggest to them that it will be easy, because there will be constrictions of time, constrictions of exams, constrictions of equipment. You know, what resources do they have? And I'm always very sad when I see teachers wanting to use material which looks wonderful, but is actually totally inappropriate for the context in which they're teaching. You know, it's very easy to get seduced by publishers' representatives who come along and show you the latest course, and it looks wonderful, it's got digital this and digital that, and da 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 da. And then you say to the teachers, do you actually use interactive whiteboards? No, but we do have one or two in the school. And you think, well, why are you going for that material? Because you won't be able to use it. And I think you have to be very, and I can say this as somebody who's been involved in publishing, I think you have to be very strong-minded when publishers' representatives come and talk to you, because obviously they want you to change, they want you to use the new course. It may be wonderful, it may be fantastic, it may be exactly what you need, or it may be wonderful and fantastic, but not what you need for your context or your users. And that's why I keep going back, boringly I think, to stress this point: know your context, know your users, know your teachers. And one of the things that I wish was more practiced in teacher training programs was how to evaluate materials. Does anybody here have the responsibility for choosing or recommending materials? Well, lucky you, because it's an awful responsibility. I mean, lucky you if you don't. There's something you don't. It is a responsibility, because you will know, those of you who are currently teaching, you will know how central the material is to what you're doing. And if you get a good material that fits what you want, it's great. You don't have to use absolutely every bit of it, but it gives you something to shape your lessons around. You will also know, I'm sure, as I've done, when you have to use a course book, because somebody made the decision 3 or 4 years ago, and nobody likes it, but the decision was made and the school has bought it, and that's what you're going to use. And as a teacher, that's really tough, I think, because you're sort of fighting against it. So materials evaluation is, I think, really important and should be part of training programs. And it's something that I'm pushing quite hard, is sort of for international training exams. Because one of the sad things about publishing, I think, is that where in the past there were a lot of small-ish publishing companies, or where most of the people employed by publishers had actually got a real teaching background, and I don't just mean one year teaching, I mean real teaching. Now, and it's partly because of the cost of travel, very few publishing people from international companies will actually spend time visiting countries to actually find out what teachers need. Publishers, and I may be wrong about Peru, but people will come from publishing companies to conferences. You can meet them on the exhibition stands, and it's always good to go and talk to them and tell them what you want. But they won't do what I've spent a lot of time doing, and which is very expensive, sitting in classrooms and observing. And I have learned so much, this is as a publisher and a writer, watching teachers whose own English may not have been very good, but where there was an empathy and a connection with their learners, they were teaching very effectively big classes of 30, 40 people with, not very many aids to help them. So I think observation is important, as I said right at the beginning, for all of us as teachers. I really wish that publishers would do it more. And if you meet somebody from a publishing company, especially an international one who, doesn't know Peru that well, if you have the opportunity and they are open to it, invite them into your school, and say, come and meet some of my colleagues, come and watch the classes. Most of them will look terrified, and they won't have time, it won't be on the budget, and it won't be on the plan, but it's worth trying, because it seems to me this direct connection between what you, specific people working in a specific context here in Peru, need for you and your teachers for now and the future is the only way that you will get better materials. So, I am conscious of time. What I'm going to say is, those of you who looked at the Red Book will find that it's full of questions. There is a text that suggests what I and Vinny were thinking about teaching various things, but we've added a huge number of questions, discussion points and so on, because we've got a certain experience, but we're not experts in the sense that we know everything. And what we want to do, and I think it's part of teacher education, encourage teachers to think, reflect, analyse, discuss, and make their own decisions. My decision is it's break time.